When using collective terms like the masses or the proletariat, our brains perform a quick trick. The novelist George Eliot called it the picture writing of the mind, a process where we reduce a massive, complex population to a clean, abstract image that is almost entirely divorced from reality. For centuries, art and literature have reinforced a specific delusion about the working class. We are shown idyllic landscapes where rosy-cheeked children play and cheerful peasants lounge peacefully in the shade after a light day's work in the fields. The physical reality of the rural working class is different. The true agricultural laborer walks with a heavy, exhausted slouch. Their lives are defined by harsh, grinding repetition, and their only reprieve usually comes at the bottom of a third quart of ale. George Eliot argued that basing social policy on this Cockney sentimentality is a recipe for disaster. If politicians write laws for a romanticized, fictional version of the working class, those laws will inevitably fail the actual humans they are meant to help. To enact genuine social reform, leaders have to stop theorizing from comfortable armchairs and study the gritty, natural history of the people on the ground. To prove this, Eliot pointed to the work of Wilhelm Riehl, a researcher who spent years wandering the German countryside to document exactly how the peasantry lived. Riehl discovered that the true rural worker operates on a psychological wavelength rooted in historical momentum. They aren't driven by modern logic or emotional sensibilities. Their lives are governed by one supreme law: deep, unyielding custom. This devotion to tradition dictates every physical aspect of their day. In the dead of summer, villagers in the Black Forest would wear thick, suffocating fur caps simply because their grandfathers wore them. In other regions, women went to field labor wearing 7 heavy petticoats, enduring the heat rather than breaking historical dress codes. This commitment to the past extends to crime and punishment. In one village, the historical penalty for minor offenses was being locked in the local pigsty. When a progressive new magistrate replaced the sty with a modern jail, the villagers revolted. They actually petitioned the government to bring back the pigsty, demanding to be punished exactly as their ancestors had been. They also maintained an intense, deeply ingrained habit of litigation. A peasant would pursue a financially ruinous lawsuit over a tiny scrap of land, knowing from day one they would get nothing out of it. They engaged in these bitter legal disputes because it was simply the custom of the country. For this class of people, tradition replaces both individual sentiment and rational theory. They remain immune to intellectual, political arguments because their entire worldview is rooted in historical repetition. The collision between modern political movements and this traditional mindset creates total chaos. We can see this clearly in the widespread European uprisings of 1848. Rural workers heard that a revolution was happening, but they had no concept of constitutional rights or democratic theory. They interpreted revolution as a return to older traditions. They marched into the state forests, aggressively chopped down the trees, and shot the local game, reclaiming ancient grazing and logging rights they felt had been stolen centuries ago. Looking at this map of Germany, Riehl observed these distinct political behaviors mapped directly onto the country's physical geography. The North's broad plains produced heavily centralized populations, but Middle Germany's mosaic of river-divided valleys created a fragmented society that reacted to political change differently. While politicians worried about the manual laborers, the real threat to stability came from Germany's Fourth Estate, an impoverished, overproduced educated proletariat. Universities were churning out more intellectuals than the economy could employ, creating a restless class of hungry writers and thinkers. Political unrest is never a blank slate. It is a complex collision of physical geography, historical misinterpretation, and the agitations of an unemployed intellectual class. Through these observations, Eliot and Riehl arrive at a shared conclusion. Society is incarnate history. It is a living thing, grown over time. You cannot redesign a nation from scratch using a theoretical blueprint. The external conditions of a society are physically rooted in the internal, inherited psychology of its people. Eliot compared this to language. Imagine replacing messy English with a strict mathematical system of identical dots and ticks. It might be efficient on paper, But by stripping away idioms, you destroy the soul of human connection. The language dies. True social reform requires an approach of social political conservatism. It means acknowledging that society is a living organism and guiding its development by working with its deep historical roots, rather than severing them with abstract theory.